If someone loves you from beyond the grave, was it ever a lie? Good evening, and welcome back to Wisdom by the Fireside. In today's live story, we explore something stranger than fiction, when love refuses to die, even if the man behind it already has. It's a journey through grief, deception, healing, and the mysterious places where the spiritual and emotional collide. She thought she found the love of her life, until he vanished before their wedding. What she uncovered afterward still echoes in her heart today. Her name was Jenna. She lived in the small town of Dover, Pennsylvania, where winters whispered across fields and people still waved from porches. Jenna wasn't lonely. Not exactly. She had a cat, a good job managing a local bookstore, and Wednesday game nights with her sister Rachel. But after a rough breakup in 2021, she stopped trusting the people she could touch. It started with a friend request, Daniel. His profile photo was a little blurry, a man with soft brown eyes and a serious smile, standing beside a lake with pine trees behind him. She didn't know him, but the message was kind. I know this is random, but I saw your post about The Alchemist. I loved that book too. Mind if we talk? She almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, she replied, and that first message opened a door. They talked for hours that night. And the next. Texts turned into voice notes. Voice notes turned into long phone calls that bled into 3 a.m. Jenna hadn't felt this alive in years. Daniel said he was living in Colorado Springs, working remotely as a software developer. He didn't like video calls. He was self-conscious about a facial scar from a childhood accident, he said. That struck Jenna as sad, but honest, and somehow it made her care more. You ever feel like the world forgot how to be gentle? He once asked her. She understood that, more than he could know. He sent her poems. He told her she was the reason he smiled again. He even mailed her little handwritten letters, each one scented faintly with pine, always ending with, "Yours, Daniel." By spring of 2023, she told her sister she was in love. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Have you seen his face live? Not on camera, but I know him. Rachel didn't say more, but she didn't need to. 1 year after the first message, Daniel proposed over the phone. Jenna, I've never known peace until you. Will you marry me? He mailed a ring, antique gold with a blue sapphire. It was beautiful. Jenna said yes. The date was set, October 12th, 2024. Small church, no guests except family. Daniel promised he'd fly in from Colorado the night before. Jenna didn't sleep that week. She kept picturing his face at the altar, even if she only knew it from a photo. But when the music played, he didn't walk in. And when the clock hit 3 p.m., the priest whispered, maybe give him a little more time. By 4:30, her sister pulled her into the back room, eyes wide with panic. No call, no text, nothing. Just silence. She didn't cry at first. She just sat in her dress, while guests whispered and left. But by sunset, the illusion broke. She sobbed until she couldn't breathe. Did I just imagine all of it? Was he even real? Rachel made her tea, trying to calm her down. They called the number. Disconnected. They emailed. Undeliverable. They checked his social media. It was gone. Everything was gone. Vanished like a ghost. But what Jenna discovered next would shatter the boundary between life and death. Rachel stayed with Jenna that night. They took off the dress, pulled the curtains, turned off their phones. But silence is loud when your heart's been broken by a whisper. Jenna stared at the sapphire ring on her finger like it might explain something. Anything. Who was he? The next morning, she opened the shoebox where she'd kept every letter Daniel had sent her. There were over 24. And something clicked. He always used the same return address. A place in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. It was a real address. She Googled it. A small ranch-style house near the edge of a forest reserve. She made a decision. I need to know. Within days, Jenna booked a one-way flight. She didn't tell Rachel, just left a note. I'm not crazy. I'm just not ready to live in doubt. She landed on a cold, gray morning. Colorado smelled like pine needles and wet soil. It felt familiar. Maybe that was part of the spell. The cab pulled up to the house. From the letters, wind chimes hung by the porch. A faded flag fluttered. Jenna hesitated, then knocked. A woman in her 60s answered. Pale eyes, soft gray curls. Her face froze when she saw Jenna. Can I help you? I think I knew your son. The woman's expression changed instantly, from surprise to something like grief. She opened the door wider. You better come in. The living room was full of framed pictures, but Jenna saw him right away. Daniel, same brown eyes, same serious smile. He stood next to the woman in a photo dated 2019. Jenna felt her chest tighten. Where is he? She asked, her voice cracking. Is Daniel here? The woman sat down slowly. My son Daniel died in a car accident in November of 2020. The room spun. Jenna whispered, No, that can't be. But the woman nodded. Her eyes welled up. You're not the first to come asking, but you're the only one who said you loved him. She showed Jenna the accident article, local news, black ice, head-on collision. He died on impact. Jenna felt like the walls were closing in. She'd spoken to him, heard his voice, received letters. She had fallen in love with a dead man. The woman took her hand and led her outside into the backyard under a large elm tree. There was a grave, a small headstone with pine cones and prayer beads resting beneath it. Daniel Thomas, 1993–2020. Gone from sight, never from soul. And right beside it, a stack of folded letters. The same ones Jenna had written to him, printed, placed, preserved. Every one. I printed them, the mother said softly. Every time he told me someone new had reached out. He said he wanted someone to see his soul, even after he was gone. I prayed God would send someone kind, someone who could see the boy he was. Jenna stood in stunned silence. The wind moved through the trees like a whisper, and for a moment she felt it. Him. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just wept. But they weren't tears of betrayal. They were release. What if love was bigger than time? What if the soul simply reached until it was finally heard? But Daniel wasn't the last surprise waiting in Glenwood Springs, because the next morning, someone knocked on the door, and when Jenna opened it, she gasped so hard she nearly dropped her tea. There, on the porch, stood Daniel, alive. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back, knocking over a chair. "Daniel?" she whispered. The man on the porch looked stunned too. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Same eyes, same voice, same face, but different presence. Lighter, less serious. The woman behind Jenna gasped. "Eli?" He turned toward her. "Hey, Mom. Mom?" Jenna's knees gave out. She collapsed onto the sofa, hands trembling. The woman quickly stepped in. "Jenna, this is Eli, Daniel's twin brother." Twin? She hadn't known. Daniel had never mentioned a brother. Eli sat across from her, concerned. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." She let out a soft laugh, and then she cried again. "I think I have." His mother explained in quiet tones, her fingers laced tightly. After Daniel died, Eli left town. Couldn't bear the memories. He only just returned. Jenna stared at Eli. He looked like Daniel, but laughed easier. His hands fidgeted. He didn't carry the same stillness, but he was real. Eli stayed for dinner. Jenna barely spoke. She was too busy watching. Every gesture reminded her of Daniel, but it wasn't him. Still, when Eli turned to her and said, "I'm sorry for whatever brought you here," her heart ached with something unfamiliar. Maybe grief wasn't just about loss. It was about finding too much too fast and not knowing what to do with it. That night, as she lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling fan, she clutched one of Daniel's letters, and she whispered into the dark, "Did you know this would happen?" No answer, just the wind tapping the window. The next morning, Eli offered to drive her into town for coffee. "It's the least I can do after shaking you up like that." They walked along the Colorado River, the chill air catching her breath. Jenna finally asked, "Why didn't Daniel ever mention you?" Eli's smile faded. "We were close when we were kids, but after Dad died, things changed. Daniel got quiet, thoughtful. I got reckless. We fought, drifted. When I left for Denver, we didn't talk much anymore. After he passed, I couldn't face home." He looked down at the pavement. I've always wondered if I failed him. Jenna touched his arm gently. He loved deeply. Even in death, he found a way to be seen. I don't think that's failure. Eli blinked. A smile tugged at his mouth. You're kind. I think he wanted me to meet you, she said quietly. He looked at her, startled. Why do you say that? She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because somewhere in her heart, she knew. This wasn't coincidence. This was providence. That night, before Jenna packed to leave, she stood once more by Daniel's grave. The pine air was cold. A single snowflake drifted onto her hand. She placed her hand on the headstone. Thank you for finding me, for healing what I didn't know was broken. She left behind the sapphire ring, but she didn't leave empty, because the man she thought she lost had somehow led her to someone who was still here, and something inside her whispered, this story wasn't over yet. Back in Dover, Pennsylvania, the world felt smaller. The bookstore was still there. The same cat greeted her at the door, and Wednesday game nights resumed with Rachel. But Jenna wasn't the same. She had buried a dream and unearthed a mystery. Daniel's letters were locked at a chest beneath her bed. She didn't reread them. She didn't have to. Every word had stitched itself into her memory. And Eli, he started texting. Not romantically, not yet, but often. Photos of the snowy trail he hiked, a snapshot of their mom baking, a voice message that said, "You popped into my head. Just wanted to say hi." It was simple, unassuming, but it made her smile. 3 months passed. Then, in February 2025, Jenna did something she hadn't done since Daniel disappeared. She spoke publicly. She created a blog post called When Grief Knocks Gently. She told her story, the love, the ghost, the letters, the grave, the twin. She didn't name names. She didn't try to explain everything. She simply wrote, sometimes love doesn't follow logic. It follows the soul. It went viral. Thousands of comments poured in, from widows, widowers, fiancés who never made it to the altar. People started writing to her, asking her how she healed, how she kept believing in love. And for the first time, Jenna didn't feel alone. A month later, she did something braver. She rented a small storefront just 2 blocks from the bookstore and hung a handmade wooden sign outside, the Healing Letters Center, for those grieving love lost too soon. Inside, she set up a quiet room with tea, soft music, a fireplace projection on the wall, and blank stationery. She invited people to come right to the ones they'd lost. No therapy, no labels, just words, just letting go. Eli flew in for the opening day. He brought a bouquet of wildflowers and a small tin box. Daniel's, he said. He used to keep his favorite poems in it. Thought you might want it here. Jenna's eyes filled. Thank you. As guests began arriving, one by one, Jenna stood in the back, watching people take the blank paper, the pens, and begin to write. Some cried, some smiled, some sat still for minutes before moving their hand. Eli walked up beside her. "You built something beautiful." "I didn't. Daniel did. I just followed where he led." They didn't kiss that night. They didn't confess anything dramatic, but as they stood under the streetlight outside the center, Eli reached out and held her hand, and she didn't let go. Because this wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about honoring someone, and maybe, just maybe, about trusting love again, even if it came wearing a different name. Spring in Dover came like a secret. It didn't announce itself. It just softened the edges of everything. Trees bloomed along the sidewalks. Jenna opened the windows in the Healing Letters Center. Fresh air carried stories in and out. And Eli kept calling. He came to visit twice in April. The second time, he stayed a week. They shared slow walks and quiet dinners. Jenna introduced him to Rachel, who gave him the "you hurt her, you disappear" stare. He passed, but Jenna was cautious. Not because she didn't feel something, but because she did. And it scared her. Was she falling for Eli, or the ghost of Daniel still living in his face? One evening, they sat by the river, skipping stones. Eli broke the silence. "You ever feel like someone's writing your life out for you?" Jenna glanced at him. "All the time." He looked down at the water. "Sometimes I wonder if Daniel orchestrated all this, like he reached out through you to pull me back home." She smiled. "Maybe he did." He paused. "But I don't want to be a replacement, Jenna." She turned to him. "You're not." He held her gaze, then whispered, "I've never met anyone like you." Then he kissed her, software hesitant, real. She didn't cry. She just let it happen. That night, Jenna returned home and took out Daniel's final letter, the one she'd never opened. She had saved it for when she was ready. The envelope was marked with the date, October 10th, 2024, 2 days before their wedding. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the page. "Jenna, if you're reading this, then somehow I failed to show up. Maybe I lost my way again. Maybe time ran out. But please know, everything I told you was true. Every word, every thought. You made my soul feel seen. If this love can't reach you as I hoped, maybe it can still lead you to something better. Maybe to someone who can give you what I couldn't. My brother, he lost his light years ago. I think you might be the only one who can help him find it again. He looks like me, but don't love him because of that. Love him because he stayed, because he's real. You were my last miracle. I hope I'm yours too. Yours always, Daniel." Jenna folded the letter slowly and pressed it to her heart. The ache didn't vanish, but it changed. Because this was closure. This was permission to move forward. Not to forget, but to live again. 2 weeks later, Eli asked her to come back to Colorado Springs with him for a weekend. She said yes. They hiked, they cooked, they watched the stars, and as they lay in a hammock beneath the pines, Jenna whispered, "I used to think love was either real or fantasy, but maybe it's both." Eli held her close. "Then let's live both, together." But even in peace, the past has a final twist. Because one morning, Eli brought her an old journal he'd found in a box in the attic. It was Daniel's, and between pages of sketches and poems was a photo Jenna had never seen before. A photo of her. Jenna's hand trembled as she held the photo. It was unmistakably her, standing in the aisle of her bookstore, mid-laugh, head tilted, holding a paperback of The Alchemist. It wasn't a selfie. It was taken from outside the glass window, from the street. She blinked, stunned. "This is from before we even spoke." Eli leaned in, just as confused. "He never told me he came to Pennsylvania." "He didn't," Jenna said softly. "He told me he found me online. That's how it started. But this photo changed everything. It meant he'd seen her before. He had come, in person. Was their entire connection more intentional than she ever imagined? Had Daniel chosen her long before she ever replied? She flipped to the back of the photo. A date was scribbled in Daniel's handwriting. August 5th, 2021. 2 months before his death. The journal was filled with other fragments, bits of poetry, sketches of faces, trees, abstract forms, and then, tucked between the pages, a folded napkin. On it was scrawled, "She's the one. But I don't know if I'll have time." Jenna's eyes welled up. It was as if Daniel had known something was coming, as if he had seen his end. And instead of pulling away, he stepped forward. He reached out in the only way he could, with words, with spirit. And somehow, he had made her believe in love again. Later that evening, Eli found her on the porch swing, watching the sunset in silence. He sat beside her. No questions, just presence. After a while, Jenna whispered, "He saw me. Before I ever saw him, he knew me. Before I even existed to him." Eli took her hand gently. "He saw what I couldn't see for years, that I needed someone to bring me home." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We didn't lose him. We just carried him forward." The next morning, Jenna stood alone by Daniel's grave once more, this time with Eli standing a few feet away, close but giving her space. She placed the photo at the base of the headstone, weighed down with a small pine cone. Then she spoke. "Thank you for loving me from wherever you were, for trusting me with your words, for believing that I could still choose to live. I will carry you, not as a ghost, but as a beginning." She exhaled slowly. "I found him, Daniel. I found your brother. And I think You already knew I would." They drove back to Pennsylvania the next day, not as strangers, not as broken people holding fragments, but as two souls brought together by the echo of one that never truly left. And somewhere between the miles, Jenna felt peace bloom in her chest. Not because the pain was gone, but because love had done its job. It had led her home. Back in Dover, word of the Healing Letters Center spread like ripples on still water. Jenna started receiving letters from across the country, envelopes with trembling handwriting, stories of loss, heartbreak, and hope. Some came with pressed flowers, others with photographs, a few with nothing but a single sentence. "Thank you for reminding me. Love isn't gone. It just changes form." She began archiving them. Not digitally, physically, each one stored in hand-labeled boxes, organized by city and date. Eli called it her Library of the Lost. He helped her build shelves to house it all. Together, they added a quiet reading nook, a remembering corner with candles, and a wall where visitors could pin notes to their lost ones under a sign that read, "If they could hear you, what would you say?" Eli began staying longer. First, it was just weekends, then full weeks. By May 2025, he moved into a guest apartment above the Healing Letters Center. He found part-time work as a local park ranger, something that kept him close to the pines, where he said he felt Daniel most. They weren't rushing love, they were just building it. Jenna once joked, "We're dating in the shadow of a ghost. That's not intimidating at all." Eli had smiled. Well, thankfully, he was a romantic. On a quiet Thursday evening, Jenna lit a candle and sat alone with her journal. Not Daniel's, Heron. She wrote something she hadn't dared write before. "I don't feel haunted anymore. I feel watched over. And I think I might be ready to say yes again." She closed the journal and stared at the flickering flame. Then her phone buzzed. It was Eli. A photo message. A trail in the woods. A patch of early wildflowers. And his note, "If you squint, they look like tiny sapphire rings." Jenna smiled. Her hands didn't tremble anymore. That weekend, they drove to a nearby overlook. One Daniel had once written about in a letter she'd memorized. "There's a cliff near the pines that makes the sky feel so close. It's like God's breath on your face." They hiked the trail in silence, holding hands. And when they reached the cliff, Eli turned to her, heart pounding. "I don't have a ring, and this isn't a proposal yet. But if I ever asked you, one day, to be more than a story that started with grief, would you say yes?" Jenna looked at the sky. It did feel close. She turned back to him. Yes. But something else was coming. A letter. From someone she hadn't heard from before. With handwriting she recognized all too well. Only this time, it wasn't Daniel's. The envelope arrived without a return address. Cream-colored paper, slightly aged, the handwriting on the front to Jenna. if this still finds you." Her heart stopped. She sat at her desk in the Healing Letters Center, surrounded by candles, sunlight pooling through the window. Hands trembling, she opened it. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was nearly identical to Daniel's, but sharper, a little less poetic, a little more cautious. "Jenna, I hope this doesn't feel like an intrusion. I debated writing this for months. I found your blog, your words about Daniel, about love, about loss, and I realized you deserved to know something. My name is Benjamin. I was Daniel's roommate in Denver during the last 6 months of his life. Daniel was different from the rest of us. Quiet, kind. He used to sit on the balcony at night and talk about a woman he saw once while driving through Pennsylvania. He said she looked like she carried stories in her eyes. He told me once, 'If I ever reach her, maybe I'll find peace.' He began writing you long before he had the courage to send anything. He never told me your name, only that he felt like God had placed you at the end of his thread. I was there the day he printed his last letter to you. He taped it to his mirror and said, 'If I don't make it, maybe she'll still find me.' I'm sorry you had to go through that pain, but I also want to say, he wasn't playing with your heart. He believed you were his redemption. I thought you should know." Benjamin. Jenna sat in silence. She read the letter again and again. Every line confirmed what she already believed, but somehow it made the story even more real, even more divine. Daniel hadn't stumbled into her life. He had been reaching from a place of longing, from a place of regret, and maybe from somewhere beyond. Later that night, she told Eli, they read the letter together, side by side. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "He must have seen something in you that even I missed. Until now." Jenna whispered, "Or maybe he knew you'd need me too." Eli nodded slowly. "I think he saved us both." In June, Jenna hosted the Healing Letters Center's first public gathering. They called it the Day of Remembering. People came from 9 different states. They shared stories, sang soft hymns, lit candles, and read letters aloud to their lost loves. Jenna stood at the end, holding a final note. She didn't read it. She simply placed it into the fire gently, watching it curl and vanish. Her goodbye, her beginning. And 1 month later, on a quiet hill, surrounded by only the closest friends and family, Jenna wore a pale, lavender dress. Eli stood under the elm tree, and this time, the groom showed up. The wedding wasn't grand. No aisle, no string quartet, just sunlight breaking through leaves, a circle of chairs beneath the elm that once shaded Daniel's grave, and a hush in the air that felt like something sacred. Eli wore a charcoal gray suit. His mother cried before he even said a word. Rachel stood beside Jenna, holding her bouquet. She squeezed her sister's hand before she stepped forward. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Jenna smiled softly. "I was born ready." I just had to be broken first. The vows were written on paper, aged by love, and folded in trembling hands. Eli spoke first. I used to believe I didn't deserve the kind of love that healed. I thought I was too late to become someone worthy of more. But then, you walked into my life like a letter meant for someone else. And somehow, you still read every word. Jenna's voice shook as she began. I was engaged once to someone who didn't show up, but somehow he still led me here. Eli, I don't love you because you look like him. I love you because you stayed, because you're real, because when you held my grief, you never tried to erase it. You added to the story instead. There wasn't a dry eye under that tree. Even the breeze seemed to pause. They didn't release doves or toss confetti. They simply walked hand in hand back down the hill and placed a white rose on Daniel's grave. Jenna whispered, "He did it, Daniel. You brought us together. Thank you." Eli added quietly, "We'll carry your legacy and your love." The elm leaves rustled gently above them, and somewhere, whether in memory or miracle, it felt like Daniel smiled. Back in Dover, the Healing Letters Center celebrated quietly. Guests lit candles and wrote love letters to the future. Jenna pinned one to the wall. It read, "To the love I didn't expect. Thank you for being worth every ache that came before." That night, she and Eli sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, watching fireflies. Jenna turned to him. "Do you think people will understand our story?" Eli smiled. "Not everyone, but the ones who've loved and lost, the ones who've seen heaven and heartbreak in the same breath, they'll know." She leaned into his shoulder. "Maybe we're not the only ones Daniel saved." And for the first time in years, Jenna slept without dreaming of what could have been, because she was finally living what was. Months passed, but the story never faded. People kept writing. They visited the Healing Letters Center, not just to grieve, but to hope. Jenna and Eli became part of their town's heartbeat, a quiet miracle hidden behind a wooden sign and flickering candles. One evening, as autumn returned and gold leaves scattered the sidewalks, Jenna sat in the back room reading a new letter. It was from a young widow in Tennessee. She wrote, "I thought I'd never love again, but your story reminded me that maybe love doesn't die, it just finds new ways to reach us." Jenna folded the letter, heart warm. Later that night, Eli joined her in the reading nook. He brought 2 mugs of cinnamon tea and kissed her temple. "I've been thinking," he said. She looked up. "Dangerous." He laughed. "What if we created a national letter project? Mobile exhibits, healing letters on the road. Every town gets a chance to grieve, to write, to release." Jenna blinked. "You want to turn this into something bigger?" He nodded. "Daniel never wanted his voice to die. I think this is how we keep it alive." She didn't speak right away. Then she took his hand, smiled, and said, "Let's do it." And so it began. One converted Airstream trailer. dozens of cities, thousands of letters. By 2026, the Healing Letters Project became a quiet revolution, a spiritual protest against grief without healing, a map of human stories, bound not by loss, but by love after loss. Everywhere they went, someone came forward with a story that mirrored Jenna's. A mother who lost her child, a soldier who lost his brother, a bride who never made it down the aisle. They all said the same thing. I thought I was alone until I heard your story. And in every town, Jenna told them, you're not alone, because love doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. Sometimes it becomes a letter, sometimes it becomes a center, and sometimes it becomes someone new. Back in Dover, on quiet nights when the road wasn't calling, Jenna still visited Daniel's grave. She no longer came with tears. She came with updates, laughter, gratitude, memories. Sometimes she just sat beside the stone and watched the sky. And when the wind passed through the trees in a certain way, it still felt like Daniel was listening. Love isn't always tidy. It doesn't always arrive on time or in the way we expect. Sometimes it comes wrapped in mystery, in loss, in letters sent from beyond a grave. But when we follow its trail, with faith, with courage, we often find not just healing, but redemption. Jenna thought she was being deceived, but in truth, she was being led to herself, led to love, led to the life she was meant to live. So tonight, we ask you, do we always recognize a blessing when it arrives late? Can love survive even death if it's sent with purpose? And how many of us are still carrying a letter we haven't yet delivered? Thank you for spending this evening with us, and thank you for being part of our little fireside circle tonight. If the story touched your heart, share it to the ones you love. And if you would like to listen to more like it, you know where to find us.